for today, we're going to do a brief overview of the first kind of 6 steps of engagement, ladder of engagement that we have spent the past 2 sessions on. Then I'm excited to share some interviews. I'll share a little bit from Alissa. And also we've got some great interviews that I'm really hoping. One of the things I was excited about for this series was to get behind the curtain a little bit, get some funders, some decision makers, and hopefully what you'll hear from them will be of interest and helpful and able to have you improve your success rates when you're doing corporate engagement. We're going to finish off with a few top tips specific to sponsorships and also grant writing and report writing. Then we're going to have a Q&A with whatever time is left. And so I'm just going to keep on going. Here we are, the last of our 3 workshops, and really have enjoyed doing this with all of you. Apologies for my little cursor jumping around. That's going to happen today. You know us by now after 2 of these, but I'm Julie. After a career in academia, I moved into nonprofit management and fundraising. Alissa has had a career in nonprofit and programs management and also CSR and corporate responsibility. So we're really excited to have shared a little bit of our thoughts around this and hope that it has been of interest to all of you. So our kind of TLDR about corporate engagement has been flipping it on its head and thinking not to start with sponsorships and grants and applications, but to realize that corporations are made up of people. And so if you can get your ladder of engagement, your steps together that are really prioritizing and centering the people at the core of the corporations, that is going to improve first money all along the way, engagement all along the way, but also by the time you get to step 6 for grants and sponsorships, hopefully you'll be seeing a much larger kind of rate of return because you have all of these interconnected ways of staying connected and building deep and meaningful relationships with lots of different angles of the organization. So that starts with systems. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the systems was the real one. You know, if you don't have those systems in place, make sure that they are, and then you can move through all of this and then get to grants and sponsorships, which we are here to talk about today.
Hi, Julie.
Thank you so much for finding time. I know scheduling is always fun, but appreciate talking with you for a little bit about grants and sponsorships here.
Yeah, let's do it. And sorry, everybody, that I can't be there today. But we're going to talk a little bit about it now.
And they all know where to reach you at your website, which is?
Yes, AlissaRmay.com.
Grants and sponsorships. How do you distinguish between the 2?
That's a really good question, because we are putting them together in this last step that we're talking through. I'd like to distinguish between the 2 because they are different to begin. And grants are typically given out via a company's funding arm, like a foundation, and are on a particular cycle, typically. And I think if we have any grant writers here, you know this cycle very well. They can be by open application or they can be by invitation only. And you'll have a good chance at the invitation only grants if you've committed to those first 5 steps that we talked about, I think. So you've got a committed community of employees. They know about those grants internally. They're going to hear about them. They're going to be able to elevate your cause internally to the folks that are working on the grant making and really can rally for your cause, and you can get that internal invite. So that's a grant. And then when we talk about sponsorship, those dollars are typically allocated to particular cost centers at a company. So you're not going to be, most likely, you're not going to be getting those sponsorships from the CSR folks at a company or even the foundation are doing sponsorships less and less these days. So those are going to come from those champions that you've engaged and the executive leadership that you get engaged. So anyone that commands a budget line or a cost center, you're going to have a much higher likelihood of being able to tap into those sponsorship dollars. So that's a good place to find out from your ERG leaders, your employee resource group leaders, if they are leadership, if they have responsibility for a budget. And you're going to want to engage the folks that you have already and ask, you know, are you close to this executive? Does this executive have some extra money in their budget and in their cost center to be able to throw around? And I think, you know, a lot of times it ends up being that way. And I will say that end of quarter is a great time to grab those dollars at most companies, because most companies have a use it or lose it policy on the budget. So they're trying to find places to have those dollars go to really good use. And this is oftentimes a really good place for that.
Can you talk more just in your experience with all of this and how it's worked for you in the past? Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think at Salesforce, there's, like I said, the executives and leaders have access to some of those cost centers that you can tap into. I will say on the grant side, a lot of companies, and Salesforce included, are starting to do smaller, I would say more accessible grant programs. Smaller, more accessible programs that are going to be aligned with the foundation's strategic focus areas. So again, if you have a good community of support internally at a company, you get that invite and you can have access to those grants, those calls for applications, you've got a much better chance of capitalizing on that. Those dollars are few and far between too, and they're a little bit more fleeting. Those, you know, you're not going to keep getting awarded those year over year. They're not multi-year typically. They're kind of a one and done injection of some capital to catalyze growth, which is hence the Catalyst Fund. So yeah, that's not something that you're going to build a lot of sustainability around, but it's something that you can certainly tap into. You know, we've done such a good amount of thinking around these steps. If you can really embrace those first 5 steps, and you talked about it in the last session, we've turned this on its head. Folks typically think you got to come out the gate swinging, asking for a big grant, asking for a big sponsorship. And that's just not the way you're going to be able to build a sustainable model. So make sure that you really put time into building out those first 5 steps that we've talked about. And maybe the grants and sponsorships will follow, but maybe they won't. And you won't need them at the end of the day. So yeah, I think that would be my tip, that you just embrace our tips that we've shared with you. And it's really just been such a pleasure to share this information with you, Julie. I hope it's been helpful to folks. Like I said, reach out if you have questions, you want to talk more about this. Let me know if you've implemented 1 or 2 or all of the steps. We'd love to hear from you. So yeah, thanks, Julie.
All right. So some key takeaways from Alissa's share out is, my thought here is around this idea that sponsorships are coming from departmental budgets often, or CSR budgets, not necessarily the foundation themselves, which is where the grants come from. Key times to reach out: end of quarter, see if there's any coins left in the cushion or any leftover budgets there. But also, and for those of you who have done this before, as soon as possible. Like, don't wait for the end of the quarter just to see, because also a lot of companies, especially if they're larger, sometimes will do their budgets based off of a year. So say if you reach out in February, they might say, oh, the calendar year's already spoken for. We decided that in December when we were finalizing our budgets. So a little bit there of, as soon as you know you have an event or sponsorship, reach out and maybe circle back or have those champions kind of check in at the end of quarters and see if there's some discretionary funds that are left. So our next interview is going to be with Ron from Salesforce. Let me see if it starts automatically, and I'll probably go off of video for this one. You see enough of me.
Sure. Ron C. Smith. I've been at Salesforce 6 years, and I lead our strategic giving for the Salesforce Foundation. I'm the VP of Education. My journey, I was 20 years in education before this. So I was a teacher, a principal, led school transformation, and really came here with a plan to build a team to accelerate our strategic giving globally. So that's our work in our districts and our partnerships locally and nationally. We actually work with our district partnerships across San Francisco and Oakland, Indianapolis, New York, and Chicago, as well as we have a global footprint where we do work in the UK, Ireland, Germany, Netherlands, and France. And really what we think about is how do we provide strategic funding support those furthest from success on their journey? And the education journey really is their path to career opportunities. And I think that's one of the biggest things we tell people is everything is a stepping stone. Every dollar we give, every partnership we have, everything we build is how do we provide opportunities for those that are furthest from success to have the opportunities to have careers, for them and their families to be successful in whatever communities that they live in and support that community and to be strive on, be on a better place in the world we live in. The world needs a lot of support. We're here to partner with, and I think that's the other piece of the work we do, is how do we partner with our organizations and the nonprofits in the space, while at the same time not telling them what to do, but really going along hand in hand with them on their journey to support those in the communities that they serve.
A grant application, right? Something's come across your desk, or how does it even get to the point of coming across your desk, I think. And then also, what are your main, considerations as you're looking at something like that?
Great question. Well, we start with the question around equity. And I think that's the key for everything we do. One of the values of the company is equality, and then we go the next level down to equity. And again, we're really asking the question, what are the populations that are furthest from success? In the United States, that's normally listed as our African American and Latinx populations. Around the world, we add another layers like our newcomers, our refugee population, as well as women. That's just the populations that historically, as well as currently, are most underserved. So within that, we ask that question, and a lot of our referrals, and I would often say 90% of our referrals really come from our partners. We're really proud of that. Our partners say, hey, we have this organization, would you mind talking to them? Or we've worked with this group for such a long time, or we're having amazing results from this partnership. Would you mind talking to them? And from that, because they're in the work, because they're in the field, and because they're on the ground, we find amazing organizations doing the work. And that's how we get it. In addition to listening to our partners, we then also listen to our employees. Our employees say, I live in X community, I'm maybe on a board, or I volunteer, or a friend of mine said, hey, there's an amazing organization that works with the school or this nonprofit, or they're working with the city. Would you mind talking to them? So when we think about our partners, when we think about our employees, having them be the conduit in which these partners come to us is really great. And it allows us, because one of the things we say is we don't want just a flood of applications. We just don't want just people saying, hey, can we get money? Because that's easy for people to do. For us, we're saying, let's listen to those that are doing the work. Let's listen to those that are on the ground. Let's listen to those that have a stake in the game as well. And they're the ones that really have the ideas and give us and drive us in the right direction. And when we think about that as a global strategy, that allows us to not necessarily be in France, but really get good information, build great partnerships, and have an amazing opportunity to go deep. We might not be in Chicago, but we have employees, our partners that do the work there. And it allows us to really just differentiate our dollars, but really concentrate our money based upon the greatest needs of those communities.
And when you say partners, is that nonprofits that you're already working with? Is it districts, or is it corporate partners? Like, what would that mean? I could see that question coming up.
The best way I'd say is yes. So it's our districts that give us a lot of referrals. Say we're working with X district, one of the 5 we support. They might have 20 nonprofits that they're working with, but then they'll say, hey, we have these 7 that we really are targeting. They're doing amazing work. Would you mind talking to 2 of them? Because you're focused on adult learners, educator support, whatever it might be. We'll say, great. Then we'll talk to those 2 nonprofits, and the nonprofits say, yes, we're working with that district. Oh, and by the way, we're also doing work in these other cities that you support as well. So now, not only are we having this nonprofit that's supporting this one district, they might be in another city, not working through the district, but working in the city, supporting the same subpopulation. So now we've differentiated our support across multiple cities or multiple countries. Same exact scenario, reverse it. We have a nonprofit that's working in a specific country, where it might say, they're like, we love the work. We're doing amazing work in the Netherlands. However, we also have a partnership that we're going to do the same work in the UK, serving the subpopulation in the UK. Would you be interested in thinking about that as a conversation or going deep in that community as well? That allows us to spread it, not peanut butter across it and just kind of recklessly spend our funds, but listen to our partners, go deep where they do the work, and then really have access and opportunity and touch points that make us, for our point, really help them on their mission to deliver the work for those communities in greatest need. With grants, we do a lot of due diligence. We have a lot of accountability. We're really looking at the impact. But what happened is we also recognized we were missing out on some small, innovative, strong organizations that were just new. They were small. They were thinking about things in a different way. They followed our strategy. They aligned with our strategic priorities, but they were just smaller than we could bring into our portfolio. What the Catalyst Fund did is it allowed us to say, wow, look at this amazing, young, innovative organization that's looking at equity through a lens, looking at the subpopulations, they're fitting into the communities that we serve. Oh, and by the way, maybe they're even supercharged by the volunteering of our partners and they work with them, the partnerships in a deeper way. Then it allowed us to think about the Catalyst Fund to really go deeper, a little bit more. We think of it more as seed and innovation dollars to really accelerate their mission and think about how they can use those dollars to go bigger and go deeper. It also, we could think about them and say, if we seed them now and be a part of their mission to go forward, what will they be in 3 years? Because now by us seeding them and hopefully getting them funding from other partnerships, potentially they can get dollars that then make them grow. And then now we can bring them into our bigger portfolio and help them be a part of a bigger mission. Where our partners and then our employees come in, is this allowed our employees to really say, hey, I have an organization. They're new, they're innovative, they're small. Normally, I guess we couldn't refer them to you. Would you be interested? So initially, we had really a opportunity for employees to submit applications and really think about partnerships. We've had so far 40 organizations come into our Catalyst Fund of the first 2 years, and we're actually thinking about how do we expand in this year 3. So it's amazing opportunities, not just for us to say, hey, we're really thinking about innovation and going to smaller groups, but really working with orgs that need different types of support. And that really helps us, helps the nonprofits, and it really helps empower our employees.
Oh, love it. Can you think of an example of an organization that has, a real employee engagement, a real groundswell of support from Salesforce employees, or what might come to mind?
So one of the organizations that we're really proud of is the Hidden Genius Project. And they started out of Oakland, California, and they focus on educating and counseling and mentoring young Black boys on their career path and career opportunity. What made this organization different and special is it didn't start with funding. It didn't start with, them using technology, and of course, they're a technology organization. It started with our employees. It was a pure volunteer organization, employee inspired, digging deep, getting in with the work. Then they became a grantee through our original Catalyst Fund. Now they're a Salesforce user. So they're actually getting the full power of Salesforce encompassed in one thing. And it really is, it's just a powerful story because a lot of times people think because of the strategic giving we do, it's like, oh, well, you get funding and then all these other things came about. At the heart of Salesforce was the volunteering. That's the one thing I always say, the one thing that every employee, no matter where you are, what level you're at, one thing you have in common is the volunteering piece of your job title. And that's the only thing from the very, very top person to the person who starts tomorrow. The one thing everyone has in common. So to have an organization that started at the foundation where volunteering was the key and then matriculated to these other avenues, it's just a powerful story. We're so happy to be with the Hidden Genius Project. When you start volunteering, you bring more people in. You have employees telling the story. You have employees empowering the groups. You have employees saying, hey, person X, go get 10 team members. We need you to come with us. Hey, there's another opportunity. Go get it. Guess what? Here's a template of what we did for this organization. You might have an organization follow the same template. And as time goes on, you might have those same opportunities. So it's just a powerful, powerful piece. And I think that's at the heart of what volunteering really is and should start off as. What I do think in this corporate space, it's how do you support organizations on their journey? How are you a part of the journey? What are your key components that you want to fund and really invest in over the long term? I think those are the things that are critical. One, are you listening to your partners and really being part of their plan and their mission and working with them on the journey? Two, are you investing on a long-term goal and not just drop and run or give it and go and not come back? Are you on the long-term journey? Three, how are you wrapping all the services you have, just like we mentioned with the Hidden Genius Project, to really help them grow? What are you bringing to bear around everything? Your employees, your funding, your resources, or whatever your company specializes in. How do you bring all of that to bear to really support that? I think that at the heart is what corporate giving should be in the future.
Do you have any kind of words of wisdom or top tips for as they're trying to get attention or support and funding or anything?
Just thank you for the work you do. And I recognize it's so hard. It's so challenging. I understand that, especially in the world we live in right now, where, corporations are changing their funding strategies. There's, job market is really challenging. Organizations are shifting, like I said, shifting priorities to focus on other things. So I think it's one of those things for partners, just stay in the fight, be very clear on your mission, be very clear on your strategy, know how you're going to serve the different communities, because that's critical. If you know the communities you're going to serve, I think that's going to really empower the corporations to say, oh, okay, you're in that community, or, oh, that's the subpopulation. And then just really try to find those 2 or 3 strategic partners. I understand funding and resourcing is critical. But if you find those two to three core partners that you can build through time, they can then be conduits. They can then be voices for you to grow. And that is critical. You need them to be your champion. So build that foundation with those 3 to 4, let those 3 to 4 be your champions. And in time, you'll then have the 8 to 10 to 12 that you're looking for.
All right. Let me get back. So I've got for after these little interviews, I've got kind of key takeaways and quotes. One that I got from Ron's here is that 90% of referrals for funding come from partners and employees. So again, I think that just talks to the power of having these disparate connections in different ways to have referrals, right? It's all about being able to have that being shared internally. We talked last time, I think there was a question in the Q&A around this idea of kind of a zero-sum fundraising, right? That there's only so much to go around. And I think one of the things I took away from the interview with Ron is this idea of, if nonprofits can partner together, that's how a lot of these funders are hearing about organizations. So it truly is a larger pie of which we're all trying to get pieces if we can, work together and partner on different projects. So I'm gonna keep on going. Just to say also, the videos are a little bit longer. Everybody has so much to say, and trying to squeeze all of this into one session is a challenge. When I post, and I'll tell you where that's all going to be, when I post the videos of these webinars, I'll also post the full unedited interviews for folks, just in case you happen to be interested in hearing more.
My name is Evan Schwartz. I am the Senior Director of Philanthropy for the Warriors Community Foundation.
What do you look for in applications or even general outreach from nonprofits?
So the Warriors Community Foundation is an invitation-only grant cycle. So that's usually the first step that enables us, to just make sure that we're not drifting from our mission and really making sure that everybody that we're funding is, working within the focus areas that we want to be affecting and having an impact in. We have a very engaged board, which I know we'll probably touch on later as well, but there is a subcommittee of them, our grants committee. They actually play a very major role in our decision-making process. So they each receive their own individual portfolio that's broken up from the larger group of applicants. We try to group them in focus areas. They then become the folks really directly engaging with the nonprofits, going on site visits, reviewing the application, and asking follow-up questions, and then ultimately making a funding recommendation to the rest of the board when we finalize everything.
What are your thoughts on, how nonprofits can kind of approach these invite-only grant makers?
We do keep a sort of general inquiries inbox, and we really encourage folks, we don't accept unsolicited proposals, but we really encourage everyone, if you, after looking at our mission and our sort of focus in terms of our priorities from our grants program and think you're a good fit, we really encourage folks to reach out and be proactive. I'm sure a lot of folks, especially working in development for a nonprofit, know that it's just about that persistence and following up. And hate to use the squeaky wheel analogy, but that's we only know what we know based off folks reaching out to us. So we obviously and in my direct experience, we're a very small team, so a lot of our time is spent really working on the current grants portfolio and engaging with the nonprofits that we already work with. And whenever we have some spare time, which isn't very often, we're doing our best to really kind of keep a pulse on the local sort of environment to see if there are new organizations that we're not aware of, or maybe a group that we just haven't heard from. And we may not respond right away. We may not respond the first time, just knowing, the amount of inquiries that we do get, but we are reading them. We do look at them. And that allows us to, make the connection. And then we have a lot of conversations, similar to this, where, we're able to reach out, start with a virtual meeting, or ideally go visit, meet in person, get to see a program in action. That enables us to start to build a case and can educate our board and the decision makers here about a new organization they might not have heard of and might be more open to, and we're able to provide really concrete examples of why they're a good fit. And actually, I've met with Julie, who works for the development team at said nonprofit, and they were very proactive in reaching out and very prepared, and had clearly looked at, the priorities that we have and made a very compelling case for why they fit into that, to our sort of strategy and to our work. So persistence, and reaching out, and, trying to, I think the other thing I would say is it doesn't have to be, myself or my equivalent at another funder, another foundation. Sometimes just getting a foot in the door and seeing someone, whether it's on LinkedIn or through another means that that works at that foundation or that organization, and being upfront and saying, hey, I don't know who the right person is on the philanthropic side or at the foundation there, but if you could help with an introduction. I know they're invitation only, so want to respect that, but we really think that we're a great fit for the work that they want to be doing, and would love to be able to meet with them and just tell them a little bit more about what we do. And that's been something that's happened many times in my time at the Warriors.
Can you talk a little bit about like the power dynamic and how it works between a philanthropy or a program officer and the board of directors?
Yeah, and again, speaking only from my personal experience, as I mentioned, we have a very engaged board, and they play a really key role in not just sort of the overall direct governance and management of the foundation, but in particular around the grants program. For myself and the other staff, it's really about staying really informed, and having the best information to really paint a picture for them. It really depends on the individual board and the individual board members. Some of them have a background in education, which again is our focus area. So they're very up to speed on what's happening on the local level at the school districts, or how nonprofits fit into this sort of larger network of service for youth, right? And in other times, they have very surface level knowledge of it and really rely on us to help educate them, give them additional context, and really help to read between the lines. I think that's the best way I could say that our role as staff is to provide as much information as we can, helping them to really, like I said, paint that picture for them of how an organization can separate themselves and is truly a really good fit, and bring them to life off the piece of paper, right? I think that's sort of how we can play the biggest role. Oftentimes, we're the ones who really have the relationships with the organization, with the staff. And I think that's where, again, we bring the most value to that dynamic, is the board relies on us, transmit the information, or hopefully facilitate an introduction for the right person at the organization, help to kind of curate a site visit that's going to really put the best foot forward for the organization, showcase what they do. So I think that's the biggest thing I can say. And then again, we try to play, behind closed doors during a board meeting when these decisions are being made and recommendations about a grant or funding and how large of a grant. That's where, our biggest role is to help, using our expertise in the rest of the year, to advocate for the organizations that we think, are having the impact that we want to be having through our support.
Can you talk about the difference to you between, sponsorships and grant making? Because I know they're similar, but same, but different.
It's pretty simple on our end. There's, the foundation, which, is the philanthropic arm. We manage and facilitate the grants program, which has a very specific, as I mentioned, application process, review process. But our sister department, we call them, is the community relations team for the Golden State Warriors. So they're much more the traditional corporate social responsibility branch of the team. So they have an entirely different set of resources and budget that comes through the corporate side. For the foundation, we're fundraising, ourselves, for the budget that we, want to have for the grants program. But oftentimes the, sponsorships, buying a table at a gala, making a donation to, an end of, year campaign or fundraising drive, that actually is something we have some visibility into. Just again, we meet frequently with our counterparts on that team, and again, when you talk about sort of dynamic, we try to help connect the dots. Oh, actually, that's an organization that we do support through the grant program. They receive a grant. We've supported them for a long time. They're a really solid organization. Basically help with the vetting process if that team isn't familiar. But at the end of the day, it's sort of flowing on a parallel path. I always make sure to mention that when we're meeting with new groups, so that they understand there really are multiple, paths to receiving support from the Warriors, because, there's just sort of a different set of resources. So that's how we think about it. And the foundation's specifically focused on education. The rest of the organization has additional pillars, they call them, of how they, different priorities, ways they want to show up and support different community initiatives. And so education is also one for them. So there's a lot of overlap, but there's additional, focus areas that allows them to support different types of organizations that would more or less be off the table for the foundation, right? We don't want to drift from our real, focus on education and supporting youth, but for example, health and wellness, right? Organizations that are working in that space, or supporting small local businesses, policy and advocacy. These are all things that the team, from a sponsorship standpoint, has a lot more flexibility in terms of what they want to support and what they can support. So I think that's the other really important distinction. Relationships are huge, right? And it's not as easy as just saying, oh, go out and form a great relationship with the program officer or the board member. But again, going back to recent times, I think if you can have an in-person personal connection with whoever it is, whether it's a staff person or a board member, at least as far as I've seen in my experience, people really do. I can't say everyone is craving that, but a lot of people are missing that connection. So to be able to start there, I think is huge. I think acknowledging that there are many different nonprofits, again, depending on what issue area you're working on, sometimes just acknowledging that you're not the only one that's doing it and that you're part of this larger fabric is actually, a really kind of transparent but genuine data point to bring to a conversation, right? Because funders, not just us, but I think everyone, they have a lot of meetings like this, right? And a lot of them go a very similar way. And sometimes that recognition is a really sort of sobering moment as part of that review process.
Excellent. All right. So, obviously, you all got your own takeaways here, but one of the things that I really heard from Evan here is this idea of we only know what we know. And so not to worry too much about reaching out and following up, even if it is an invite-only organization. Feel comfortable with sharing. These program officers want to know about the work and the field, and if they've missed you for some reason, they want to know about it. Make sure you're doing your research, sharing why you're a good fit specific. People can do that outreach or that connection on your behalf. And another thing that I think is kind of important to note is I like to think of it as translation, that the program staff are doing the work on the ground, right? And they're translating sort of to the development team what they're doing so that the development team can write proposals, which is translating it to the program officers of the foundation. And then their role is actually to also then translate it to the board of directors of the foundation who are making the choices. And so the point here is to be really clear. Because if you know any games of telephone or whatever, it can start going wrong a little bit or not being as clear once you have to go through all of those levels to get to the people who are making the decisions.
I'm Kristen Singer. I'm a Senior Executive Assistant in Platform Engineering.
I'm going to pause this for a second. I wanted to introduce Kristen as kind of a totally different employee experience, a totally different perspective here, and to think more about volunteering and engagement in that way.
I'm Kristen Singer. I'm the Senior Executive Assistant in Platform Engineering. I've been with Salesforce for almost 12 years, come October 17th. I joined with Data.com, which was an acquisition of Salesforce back in 2010. And I support 2 senior executives at Salesforce. And I've enjoyed my time with Salesforce so far.
That's great. I've got a couple of questions for you around kind of volunteer engagement, corporate engagement in that way. So for volunteering, what kind of activities and programs have you been involved with? Do you have a favorite? Is there one that was like a large group or a impact that comes to mind? Just share with us a little bit about that.
So back when I first joined, Mark is all about, giving back to the community. We had a team of about 300 at Data.com. So what we did is I basically adopted a couple of parks. So we were all about being outside because the weather's so nice down in the San Mateo area. And so we did a lot of philanthropy with the San Mateo Parks and Recreation. And we adopted a park called the Junipero Park. And we planted a lot of shrubs and cleaned up the park and put an irrigation system. The San Mateo Parks and Recreation was so appreciative and thankful for all of our hard work. We even held a couple of our company picnics or group picnics. They basically dedicated the Junipero Park to Data.com Salesforce. So if you go up to the park, you're going to see a big plaque that it says in appreciation of all of the hard work that was done by the Data.com Salesforce team. We have now dedicated this park to Salesforce and Data.com. I don't know. It was just different back then, and people were willing to drop what they were doing to go, and they looked forward to the VTOs that I put on, and just set aside the time to dedicate, because it's taking away their time from their everyday work. And they all have, pressures from the office, pressures from their boss that they have to finish their, projects that they're working on. But VTO is also very important to them as well, and giving back to the community. So I really appreciated them stopping what they were doing to put in 1 or 2 hours.
One of the things that we're talking about is how can nonprofits kind of get in with companies, or how does all of that kind of work if you don't have something like a park that's so sort of attractive and all of that. And so in your role as senior executive assistant, executive assistants, you're such kind of gatekeepers trusted by the execs to manage so many things. And I know when I was working with you for Storyblocks, you were really the inside champion that then made it happen with all these different channels. So how do you kind of advocate for employee causes and recommendations to help empower internal corporate champions? How does that stewardship happen on your side?
Yeah, so post-COVID, and of course Storyblocks does hold a special place in my heart because I thoroughly enjoy bringing that VTO to our office, especially on the rainy days, where you can bring those type of VTOs into the office. Those were also very special to us. So what I've done post-COVID to try to get the interest back with VTOs is, and what we've decided to do for this fiscal year is we put together, or I should say, I put together a spreadsheet with goals that we were going to basically focus on 1 VTO a month, along with the 3 executive assistants that are on my team. And each executive assistant was going to basically focus on that nonprofit, work with that nonprofit. We use Slack. So post the VTO on Slack, because I created a VTO channel within Slack so that it shows all of the VTOs that are available, not only within what we've created within Platform Engineering, but what's available within Salesforce Foundation. So that way it's a one-stop shop, how they can even create a VTO within their own teams. So all of the information is right there handy at their fingertips on how they can create a VTO, what is available to them that's already been created, and then what we created within Platform Engineering. It's all about reconnecting with their coworkers as well. That's also very important to us. It's all about the reconnection, and that's also being thought through within our own team as well, because a lot of us haven't seen each other in 3 years. And so it's important that we all connect with one another again. Having these VTOs once a month is something to look forward to. They know it's already on the books because I put together the spreadsheet. So we've got VTOs all the way through the end of our fiscal year already planned. They enjoy the actual VTO. They enjoy having the camaraderie of their team members, the executive interfacing because we've got the direct reports that they report into. My boss will be there, and he usually is there. So it's also nice to have that collaboration.
Connection. I'm hearing so much around the kind of connection, like what does volunteering do for the corporate volunteers, right? The nonprofits know what it's doing for them, but it's great to get that perspective from you. So thank you.
Yeah, I've been involved with the grants, and we're no longer doing grants. Basically, the money that we give to the nonprofits comes out of our own budget, our own department budget.
Okay, departmental budget. So that's something that's also really, you just, held up something that Alissa and I have been saying a lot, is that, grants and sponsorships aren't necessarily where it's at these days. You have to be able to access the departmental dollars.
Yes.
And
my boss has been really great about making sure that we have money set aside for some of these VTOs that need money. If I were to work with a nonprofit, and let's say this nonprofit, for instance, the Rise Against Hunger, the packaging of meals costs money for them. So they tell me how much it is. I then go to my finance partner and say, this is the amount of money that it's going to be needed to participate in this VTO. And then they give me the yes or no approval, whether it fits within our budget. And then we go from there.
Excellent. Any last kind of words of wisdom or top tips for nonprofits who are looking to engage corporate volunteers?
It's all about the connection. I think, you and I have had a great connection. Gosh, I think we're going, on almost 10 years? Believe it or not.
All right. So, from Kristen here, wanted people to kind of see, I think there was a question maybe in the pre-survey about, how do we connect with corporations if we don't know executives or C-suite level folks? And so really wanted to show that people at all levels, and especially executive assistants, are great to have become champions of your cause. And also to think about something like Slack, right? So people, once you've got these donors that you're reaching out to for matching gifts and that type of engagement, they can go and search on Slack or other workforce communication platforms to see what other people are doing. Are there already templates for engagement? Are there already ways that the company supports either volunteer or other sorts of engagement, whether it's sponsorships or something else? And that's what I've got here. So I'm going to kind of move along, get about 5 minutes left, and then leave some time for questions. But I wanted to share just some of my sort of top tips and tricks for grants and sponsorship writing. I see a couple of familiar faces on here, so you might have heard some of these before. One of the things that I really recommend when you're doing these is to use mirroring language. And what this means is, however the organization is talking on their website or in the grant application questions itself about something, use that same language yourself. Of course, if it applies. If it doesn't apply, don't make something up. But if they're talking about systemic inequality as their focus, use systemic inequality, those exact words. If they talk about early language and literacy, use that. If it's talking about early development, talk about that. And use this mirroring language to kind of show them that you're in lockstep with their own goals and things. Continue with these relationships. To Evan's point around following up, don't feel bad. They're just as busy, maybe not just as busy, but they're busy, not just as busy as us, but they're still pretty busy, and can appreciate actually a gentle follow-up. Hey, I don't know if you saw my cold outreach before. I'm sure you're very busy, and here's why I think that we would be a good fit to connect with. I'll get into for a moment here this idea of answer what they're actually asking in applications and reports. And if needed, create a table to map, or any other type of structure that works for you, all the parts of a question. Sometimes it's really easy to gloss over all that's being asked. So let me give you an example. For a question that says, what impact has this initiative had on the community served? It might be really easy to go to your impact kind of boilerplate or a similar impact question that you've answered before. Copy, paste, you're done, moving on. But, really think about, so for this one, they give an example of exactly what they're looking for. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different things that they want you to talk about in your answer about impact. So here is a way in which you might approach that using a table form. I would put on the left all of the details that they're looking for, notes off the top of your head or with programs input around what you've got. This also can really help when you have a null, when you have no answer to something yet, perhaps your organization hasn't approached it. And so for this one, perhaps indirectly served, right? Perhaps people have, you've really thought about, oh, well, we serve 600 fifth graders every year, but indirectly served, do you want to include their teachers? Do you want to include their families? If so, how many people per family? All of that. And then your follow-up or next steps would be, oh, I need a meeting with programs quickly because we need to come up with an answer for this before I can write the narrative to send off, whether it's an application or report narrative, if that makes sense. My other kind of top tip for folks, this is a little bit more for the small and mid-size organizations, is to make sure that you've done your seal of transparency on GuideStar. GuideStar and Candid, interchangeable now. I think Candid bought GuideStar. This is really great to, especially if you're kind of new to this world, to see if you're really ready to be competitive in grants and sponsorships, if you've got the right answers internally around the things that they're going to be asking for, because these seals of transparency are really general, very usual questions that funders and corporations through sponsorships or grants are going to be asking you. So going through this is an exercise of almost doing your first practice grant. And also, to Evan's point earlier, program officers are trying to stay on top of the field, trying to educate themselves about the work that's being done out there. And so making sure that your profiles are updated on as many systems as possible, whether it's the GuideStar Seal of Transparency, whether it's great nonprofits, the Yelp for nonprofits, whether that's any of the other kind of things that we've talked about over the last couple of workshops. Make sure that your systems are updated there. All right. So I'll end again on our lovely kind of keystone thing about all the different steps and how you can move through them all to have a truly sustainable, diverse funding stream from corporations and corporate employees. I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you so much for joining us through these three. I'm going to be posting, probably give me till Monday or Tuesday, the videos from these sessions on my new YouTube channel. Very exciting. I've made a bit.ly for it. It's long, but hopefully memorable. Julie Barton Consulting Videos. So you can go and view them here. I'll also be sending out an email with all of those links. Wanted to share Alissa and my website and contact info. If you're interested in getting in touch, we're here. Please do the survey. Love hearing feedback. Thank you so much all for your time and engagement. Really appreciate it. Keep up all the great work.